The mall suddenly caught fire, and my son and I were trapped inside. As I was about to lose consciousness from the thick smoke, Zane appeared out of nowhere and rescued us. "Aren't you supposed to be on a business trip abroad? How come you're here?" I covered my son's nose and mouth, who had already fainted, and blurted out. The next second, I saw a red lipstick mark on the collar of his shirt. Without saying a word, he turned and ran towards the deeper fitting room. He carried out a disheveled girl. It was Jolene, the impoverished college student his company sponsored. "Wife, you take our son to the hospital first. I'll go save people." 1. Wilder, my son, lay unconscious in the hospital bed. As I was reviewing the doctor's diagnosis, a young nurse came in to change his medicine and asked me in surprise, "Are you Kirsten? You're the wife of Zane, the CEO who was the hero in the fire incident on TV. You're so lucky to marry such a handsome man." I looked up and saw a flash of disdain in her eyes, as if she thought I was not a good match for Zane. On the TV, there was news about the mall fire. Zane and Jolene were surrounded by microphones, and a reporter was asking him why he had the courage to enter the burning building to save people. With red eyes, he said into the camera, "It's because my wife Kirsten and my son Wilder were also in the fire. As a husband and a father, it was my love and responsibility for them that gave me immense courage." "Then what made you go and save a strange female college student?" He turned his head and nodded slightly in Jolene's direction. "I think in such a critical situation, no one could just stand by and do nothing." Jolene wiped away her tears. "Mr. Zane is such a good man. His wife and child must be very happy." She was right. Zane had given me a happy life. Back then, he was penniless, and I accompanied him, living in a leaky rented room, working 3 jobs a day to make ends meet. He swore that once he became successful, he would let me live a good life. So, on the first day he got an investment, he spent all his money on an 18-karat diamond ring and proposed to me on one knee. The fireworks lasted for 3 days and 3 nights, and the city's big screens showed news of our wedding for 3 months. When he found out I was pregnant, he was overjoyed and bought all the baby clothes and maternity products in the city. He spent a fortune sending me abroad for prenatal care and confinement. Seeing me staring at the TV in a daze, the young nurse was even more certain of my identity, her eyes sparkling with envy. "I heard Mr. Zane say that you were his wife from the beginning when he was still a poor man. You gave up a rich second generation and resolutely accompanied him in starting a business, and he let you live the life of a wealthy wife after marriage. It's like a fairy tale. But if you could just have your face fixed, it would be even better. Our hospital has a plastic surgery package, and there's a discount right now." Hearing this, my hand signing the medical insurance reimbursement form paused. Through the reflective glass window, I realized that there was a red burn scar on the right half of my face, probably left from carrying my son through the fire. I waved my hand to refuse, and what came to my mind was what Zane had said to me when he proposed. "I will protect you for the rest of my life, no matter what Kirsten becomes. I will always love you, cherish you, and take care of you. If I break my promise, may I be struck by lightning." His expression was sincere, and he even signed a prenuptial agreement in advance, stating that if he betrayed me, he would give up all his property and leave the house with nothing. My parents disagreed, and he knelt at the door of our house in the pouring rain for 10 whole days. After getting permission, he still had a high fever, but came to cook soup and rice for me who was pregnant. "Wife, don't worry. I will definitely give you a good life and make you the happiest woman in the world." He did what he said and cherished me for 3 years. But right after I gave birth to our son, he cheated on me with the college student he sponsored, Jolene. 2. After receiving a bed photo from his mistress, Jolene, I discovered that the Overseas Prenatal Care Center, where I had been staying during my postpartum period, was actually a place Zane had set up for her to do her university internship. Even the doctor they hired was just a classmate of Jolene's who was padding her resume, not a seasoned doctor at all. He did this just to help her build the persona of a wealthy heiress. He even went so far as to put me, who had only become pregnant through IVF, in danger. And Zane's constant visits to me for checkups, disrupting his time zones to come see me abroad, were actually just excuses to meet up with Jolene more often. This business trip was probably just another excuse to get rid of me, so he could be alone with her. My son Wilder slowly opened his eyes, tears streaming down his cheeks. Through the respirator, he used all his strength to call out, "Mom." My thoughts returned to the present, and as I touched his burnt limbs, tears poured down my face. Mommy is here, don't be afraid, sweetie." If Zane had been able to safely escort us away from the fire, my son wouldn't have been burned so badly. He had abandoned us halfway through the hallway, which was still 500 meters away from the exit, in order to save Jolene. A broken beam fell on my son, and if I hadn't blocked it in time, he would have been burned to death at the scene. Zane, still covered in ash, rushed to the ward when I was crying with my son. He hugged us with heartache and roared, "How did you arrange this? Why don't you quickly arrange a private single room for my wife and son? There are so many people here, it's so noisy. How can my son rest?" After the hospital found out his identity, they immediately upgraded the ward and sent over a basket of flowers. He sat by the bed, feeding my son a tonic. Jolene lowered her head and walked over to me. "Sister Kirsten, President Zane and I just happened to finish our business trip and went to the mall to buy you a gift. I didn't expect you to be there too. President Zane was just trying to save me out of kindness. We definitely don't have anything." Her submissive posture was completely different from when she sent me those intimate photos. Perhaps because I didn't expose her immediately after receiving the photos, she assumed that I was greedy for a wealthy life and willingly wore a green hat. She took the initiative to explain for Zane. After feeding my son, he asked his assistant to bring over a bunch of luxury goods. There were the Transformers toys my son had been longing for, and new perfumes and cosmetics for me. They were all the latest models and very expensive. "I'm sorry, wife, it's all my fault. I was thinking that Jolene must be very scared alone in the fitting room. So I thought I would save you and then go save her." The media was outside, and I was also afraid that they would say I was indifferent to life. He reached up to cup my face and wanted to kiss me and comfort me as he used to. But when he saw the burned scar, his face turned black. "What happened to your wife's face?" He seemed to think of something. "Is it because of the fire?" It's okay, wife, you're still beautiful. You're always the most beautiful woman in my heart. Don't worry, I'll find the best plastic surgeon for you." Before he could finish, I interrupted him directly. "No need, just leave it. I guess it's fine as long as you don't mind." Keeping this scar would allow me to more clearly recognize the true nature of his so-called love. Zane was stunned for a moment, and after confirming that I was sincere, he relaxed and hugged me. "Okay, how could I mind, wife? You are always the most beautiful in my heart." His ending note was drawn out, and his tone was filled with undisguised pampering. Perhaps because they had seen too many cases of CEOs cheating on their mistresses, the service staff who came to deliver the gifts couldn't help but praise us when they saw our loving couple. "President Zane, your relationship with your wife is so good." 3. My body stiffened, and through his shoulder, I caught a glimpse of Jolene's unusual expression. A sense of foreboding washed over me. Sure enough, Zane's phone rang the next second. He glanced at it quickly, then stroked my head and said hurriedly, "Honey, there's something else I need to take care of at the company. I'll leave our son to you." The staff and Jolene followed him, and before leaving, he patted my son's head and lovingly told him, "Baby, be sure to listen to mommy, okay? Daddy will come see you as soon as I'm done." My son Wilder held his hand and asked reluctantly, "Daddy, stay with me, okay? I'm so scared." He was always the most obedient child and never bothered Zane's work. The doctor said the fire had left him with post-traumatic stress disorder, and he needed the company of his loved ones the most. But Zane hesitated for a moment, then placed my hand in my son's and left with a "be good" before striding away. I saw my son's reddened eyes, but didn't know how to comfort him, so I could only pretend to go to the bathroom to calm myself down. But in the next luxury ward, I could hear a man and a woman talking. The woman's hand was tugging at the man's tie, and she wrapped her arms around his neck seductively. "Didn't you say you loved your wife and son the most? So what am I? I thought you loved me the most when you saved me from the fire." The man stroked the woman's smooth skin, They are my family, of course I love them. As for you, you're just a little vixen who seduced me. And so what? Your wife is disfigured and has become an ugly monster. I don't believe you can still touch her. Otherwise, you wouldn't have come to me. Kirsten is my wife, and you're my fire extinguisher. I covered my mouth, unable to utter a word, and watched as Zane clasped the back of Jolene's head and pressed a deep kiss on her. He tore open the black stockings on her legs, and the tag was the exclusive label of the mall. Because I was standing so close, the soundproofing wasn't that good, and I could even hear Zane's particularly comfortable panting. He pinched Jolene's slender waist and let out a satisfied sigh of contentment. Young is tight. 4. Tears streamed down my face, and I finally understood why he hadn't touched me since our son was born. He had claimed that he had a vasectomy because he couldn't bear the thought of me going through another difficult childbirth. But the truth was, he simply found me old and unattractive and preferred a younger body. They had been going at it for as long as I had been standing there watching, my eyes wide open in a kind of self-torture, afraid to miss a single detail. By the time the phone's recording had captured the entire scene, and the battery was almost dead, someone grabbed the hem of my dress. My son Wilder looked up at me, his wide eyes holding a trace of undisguised heartache. "Mommy, I'm sorry." I hurriedly carried him back to the ward, but before I could speak, he hugged me tightly with his small hands. His fluffy head rubbed against my chest, and his voice was already choked with tears. "Mommy, it's all my fault, because I was born. Daddy doesn't like you anymore. He likes that sister. She's not as good as you. Mommy, I'm sorry." My heart sank. My son knew. An indescribable despair enveloped me. The grievances of the previous generation had dragged my child into it, which was the last thing I wanted to see. Wilder's face was smeared with tears and snot, and he was crying so hard he couldn't catch his breath. He kept saying, "I hate Daddy. I don't want him anymore. Mommy, let's go. He doesn't like us. We don't care about him anymore." My phone buzzed with a text message from my best friend Lydia. Scrolling up the chat history, she shared with me that she had obtained a license to provide a fake death service domestically. Thinking about my son's words, I tentatively held his small hand. "Baby, you don't like Daddy, so how about we go to a place where he can never find us? I'll take you to get treatment, and we'll get our bodies healthy, and then you'll grow up healthy and happy." Meanwhile, Jolene sent me a photo, the torn stockings, with a feigned shyness telling me that Zane was too rough. It seems the little wolf is really starving. The implication was mocking me for not having been intimate with him for a long time. Wilder, with his sharp eyes, caught sight of the message and immediately snatched the phone away to delete the record, nodding resentfully. "Okay, Mommy, wherever you go, I'll go. I don't want Daddy anymore." He spoke so fast that he started coughing. I patted his back and contacted my friend to make a decision to become the first user of the fake death service. When she called, she was full of doubts, asking me, "What's wrong, Kirsten? Aren't you and your Zane very loving? Why are you suddenly taking your son to run away? Did he upset you? A quarrel is just a quarrel. Don't be impulsive. Besides, I just saw the news. Didn't you just escape from the fire? The journey is bumpy, and your body hasn't recovered well, so it's not suitable to be on the move." I remembered the doctor had told me that my son needed to rest for a while before he could be discharged from the hospital. He was already a little tired and wanted to sleep. I hesitated for a moment, but still couldn't make up my mind, so I just said I would think about it. Zane walked in quickly with a briefcase, and when he saw that my son wasn't wearing socks, he immediately frowned. He stuffed my son into the bed and wrapped his feet with his hands, looking a little distressed. "Wilder, the floor is cold. I told you to always wear socks when walking on the floor, didn't I? If you do this again, Daddy won't like you." My son turned his face away and buried himself in the bed, refusing to look at him, mumbling, "Bad Daddy." Zane thought his son was blaming him for abandoning them halfway through the fire, so he shook his head helplessly and then lifted his chin, gesturing for me to open the briefcase. I smelled the distinctive scent of women's perfume on him and said nothing, silently opening it. On a brand new invitation, There was a line of gold lettering on a red paper background. Zayn and MS. Kirsten's copper wedding anniversary banquet. Please come and join us. 5. I was a little taken aback, and he explained, Honey, don't you remember? Our wedding anniversary is in 2 days. It's been 7 years, so it's our copper wedding anniversary. Let's have a banquet and wash away all the bad luck. It just so happens that our son is older now, and he can be the flower boy. He patted our son who was curled up in the bed. You little rascal, haven't you always been saying that you weren't there when your mom and dad got married? Now your wish has finally come true. Holding the invitation in my hand, it felt like a time bomb. I couldn't accept it, nor could I throw it away. I just felt ironic. Zayn could remember our wedding anniversary, remember the casual joke my son made, and put all the details into practice. Yet he could also be intimate with his lover Jolene, in the ward next door, kissing her passionately. The loving him and the cheating him were perfectly merged together. I was still in a daze until he was called away by the doctor to pay the medical bill. My son Wilder hugged the blanket, his face pale, and he stared blankly at his father's departing figure. Mom, I hurt so much. He clutched his chest and looked at me with tears in his eyes. Mom, you hurt too, don't you? I held him, feeling like half of my heart had been ripped out. My friend Lydia sent me the application requirements for the fake death service, and after much thought, I decided to fill out the information. As soon as I got home and found the documents to fill out, I discovered a photo album in the corner. I thought it was a collection of photos of my son from birth to the present, but when I opened it, 2 familiar faces caught my eye. There was a scene of Zayn and Jolene watching the sunrise together on a mountaintop. There was also a scene of Zayn hugging Jolene in a bikini and kissing her with closed eyes by the sea. There were even intimate scenes of the 2 of them lying naked on a hotel bed. Each photo had a date, with a frequency of 3 times a week, and the most recent one was just yesterday. A sharp pain shot through my heart, and the smiles of the man and woman in the picture felt like a knife tearing me apart. Jolene walked behind me at some point. TSK, madam, sometimes it's better to be a little stupid. She came in with a lot of bags and arranged for the housekeeper to move into the largest guest room. She arrogantly informed me that she was about to graduate and would become Zayn's personal secretary, and she would be living in our house from now on. I bit my lip, trembling with anger. Just as I was about to question her, I received an emergency call from the hospital. My son, Wilder, was suddenly having difficulty breathing, and I pushed her away and rushed to the hospital. My son had already been pushed into the intensive care unit and was in urgent need of a suitable blood source. He had panda blood, and only Zayn's blood type was the same as his. I called him trembling, but before I could speak, he scolded me. Kirsten, how could you be so vicious? Isn't it just because Jolene doesn't have money to stay at our house first? Do you have to push her against the wall? Now she's even disfigured. I'm not, I stammered. Son is in trouble. You come quickly. Enough. I've spoiled you too much, and now you're even using your son as a shield. Do you know that this is considered murder in a serious sense? I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I'll take Jolene to the doctor first, and you should reflect on yourself. He hung up the phone with a snap, and no matter how many times I called, there was no answer. Finally, the light in the emergency room went out, and the doctor pushed out a body covered in a white sheet with regret. Shaking his head, he apologized. We've done our best. If there had been a blood match, maybe there would have been hope. Alas, please accept my condolences. Lifting the white cloth, I saw my son's pale face. I cried like a heartbroken person, squatting helplessly against the wall. The nurses and doctors sent my son to the crematorium overnight. I don't know how long I cried. My phone dinged, and a message was sent to me confirming my registration. MS. Kirsten, we are sorry, but there is only one spot left for the double fake death service you booked. Would you still like it? Please reply as soon as possible if you do. Thinking of my son's departure, I was left alone. My fingers were cold, and I finally made up my mind to press confirm on the keyboard and quickly replied with a message. Yes. If possible, please arrange it for me as soon as possible. 6. Perhaps because I was the first to try it, my best friend Lydia quickly arranged a suitable time for me. It was the day of Zane's copper wedding anniversary. Since I had a fit last time, he hadn't cared about me anymore. I used to hear rumors about him and Jolene fooling around together. If it were in the past, I would have run to find him and scolded him. But now I felt nothing inside. As I stroked my son's tombstone, a chill went straight to my heart. I don't know how long I had been squatting there when the housekeeper called me to get dressed for the wedding. I stood up abruptly, my vision went dark, and I almost fell onto the tombstone. The makeup artist asked me if I wanted to cover up my scars. I shook my head, wearing a custom-made wedding dress, and stared blankly at the identical wedding dress photo on my phone. It was Jolene. She was actually holding a wedding ceremony of the same scale on the floor above the hotel, where my wedding was being held. Whether it was the decoration style or the wedding dress style, it was exactly the same as mine. She said she wanted to compensate me. What can I do? President Zane is so kind to me. I curled my lips and let out a miserable laugh. I sent a message saying, "Congratulations on your happiness," and turned off my phone. Zane walked up to me in a suit, looking a little regretful. "Honey, it's a pity that our son hasn't recovered yet, so he can't be the flower boy. But it doesn't matter. We'll just spend more time with him in the future." He kissed my forehead. "I'll have a wedding for you every wedding anniversary." He pretended that nothing had happened with Jolene and held my hand, imagining our future together. I replied softly in my heart, "There's no future. My son is dead, and I'm going to die soon too." Standing at the door to greet the guests, he kept glancing at his watch. I knew he was rushing to meet his appointment with Jolene. Sure enough, when the clock struck 12:30, the phone rang on time. He pointed at his phone. "Sorry, honey, I have to go handle some business. You stay here and wait for me." I nodded and gave him a faint smile. As if he was worried, he kissed my lips forcefully. "Don't worry, honey, I'll be right back." 7. Watching him leave, I was completely desperate. The countdown on my phone for the bomb had already started. I turned and went to the deepest part. The service arranged by my best friend Lydia to be blown up by a bomb wouldn't hurt anyone, and I could easily escape. And Zane would never find me. Perhaps because of our many years together, Zane could always remember my faint smile in response. A fear of losing me welled up in him, and he gritted his teeth, cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. He turned around in the stairwell towards Jolene. The hotel was already sounding the alarm. "Guests, please leave as quickly as possible. A bomb has been planted on the 13th floor of the hotel by terrorists. Unrelated personnel should quickly go to the fire escape." His eyes were bloodshot, and he tripped and fell several times as he ran. His knees were bruised and purple as he roared and rushed downstairs, only to see with his own eyes the fake body arranged by my friend, wearing the wedding dress he had custom-made, being blown up by the bomb. "Kirsten!" His heart-wrenching roar pierced the sky, and even I, who was already sitting in an anonymous vehicle in the basement, could hear the male voice coming from his heart and lungs. Zane, with bloodshot eyes, wanted to rush into the still-burning building, but Jolene, who had caught up, screamed and hugged his waist. Don't go in, you'll die." "My wife is still inside. I'm going to save her. My wife is still inside." He kicked Jolene away in a fit of madness, but was pulled away by the armed police who had arrived, and was eventually knocked unconscious with a sedative and placed on a stretcher. I learned about the scene through the walkie-talkie, and my best friend Lydia reminded me, "If you regret it now, it's still not too late." "No," I said word by word. "I will never regret it. Let's go." The car disappeared into the night, while at the scene of the copper wedding hotel, there was only a pile of flesh and blood left, and the charred remains of a wedding dress. The news of my son's death spread throughout the city, and by then I had already entered the research institute, and Lydia also knew the ins and outs. When she saw Zane on TV talking confidently about his business success, while at the same time saying that he had bought a star in the sky to commemorate his wife and son, she spat several times. "Hypocrite scum, cheating on you while saying he loves you, it's disgusting. You did the right thing. Kirsten, don't be fooled by this hypocritical man again." She stuck her chopsticks in her rice and tapped them angrily several times. while I gave her a relieved smile. Don't worry, I'm already dead to him, and I'll never see him again. When I said this, I was really prepared to never see him again, but I didn't expect that. At a reception where I was attracting a lot of investment for the research institute, a waiter spilled a drink on me. Hurriedly cleaning up, a handkerchief was handed to me. I looked up gratefully and met a pair of familiar amber eyes. Zane was also stunned to see me and subconsciously grabbed me and said, "Kirsten?" My body stiffened, and I couldn't say a word. Lydia heard the noise and came over to help me out. "Thank you, President Zane, for helping my good friend. She just had plastic surgery and can't drink." Her words made me instantly sober. I had had plastic surgery to avoid him, and he should not recognize me now. My heart sank back down. "President Zane, you've got the wrong person. I don't know any Kirsten you're talking about." 8. As I left the scene, my heart was still pounding. That feeling of being seen through was really unpleasant. Fortunately, my best friend Lydia told me that Zane had no reaction afterwards, so I felt relieved. On the first anniversary of my son's death, I wore a mask and sneaked to the cemetery where he was buried. There was a pile of transformers, almost filling the entire empty space. The old man guarding the garden told me that a strange handsome man had left them, and it seemed like it was because the name on the tombstone was the same as his son's. I knew that Zane had held a grand funeral for half a month after learning of my son's death, and had also had the grave moved. Presumably, he was also emotionally hurt, so he took off his mask and touched the 3 words "Wilder" on the tombstone, crying uncontrollably. "I'm sorry, son, Mommy didn't protect you. It's all Mommy's fault." Would you blame Mommy if you were down there? Blame Mommy as much as you want. As long as you're willing to come into Mommy's dream, Mommy can do anything. Baby, Mommy really misses you. With a clatter, the mechanical toy smashed to the ground. Zane grabbed my shoulder and suddenly raised his voice. Kirsten, it's you." He had come to buy more expensive toys to pay respects to this child, who had the same name and died on the same day as his son, but unexpectedly found me. I waved my hands frantically, pretending not to know, and the foundation on my face was rubbed off, revealing the burned scar from before. He became even more agitated and was completely sure of my identity. "Kirsten, it's really you, my wife. This isn't a hallucination. You didn't die. Why did you leave? Why don't you want me?" My neck was wet, and his tears were falling on my exposed skin in large drops. It was so hot it was scary. I trembled all over, gritted my teeth, and broke free from his restraint, roaring completely. "Get lost, Zane, don't touch me. If it weren't for you, how could my son have died? You've been cheating all along. You obviously love Jolene." I was incoherent, so angry that I wanted to leave, but because I was short of breath, I fainted on the spot. When I opened my eyes again, Zane was excitedly grabbing my hand and wouldn't let go. "Wife, you're awake. Do you know how scared you made me?" I pulled out the 4 and tried to run, but the ward was surrounded inside and out, and he confined me. He was unshaven and haggard, guarding me day and night, constantly apologizing. "I'm sorry, I didn't expect my son to really die. I misunderstood." "Wife, you can hit me or scold me, just don't leave me. I really can't live without you." He held me, and I couldn't move. I listened woodenly and became mute. No matter how expensive branded clothes, expensive cosmetics, or countless gold and silver jewelry were offered to me, I was unmoved. Zane became increasingly desperate to compensate me and keep me, and he even went so far as to give Jolene to the underworld in inhuman ways. It was only because he checked my phone to see if I had contacted the outside world again that he found the sordid video and Jolene's bragging WeChat messages. The tortured woman lay naked on the ground, her hands and feet shackled. "You Kirsten, you bitch." The next second, a scream rang out, and Zane stepped on the back of her hand. "Bitch, my wife's name is not something you can call," he said through gritted teeth. "If it weren't for you lying to me and stopping me from going, how could my son have died? It's all your fault. Wife, you can do whatever you want." He turned his face, his eyes shining brightly, staring at me full of pleading. "As long as you're happy, I'll kill her now." To restore my former love for him, Zane went almost crazy. He did everything that was on the edge of the law. I glanced at him indifferently and sighed. Let her go. 9. Zane froze in place, thinking I was just venting, until he heard me say, as long as you let her go, I'll stay willingly. Then, he happily untied the chains binding her. My wife is so kind. Jolene, you lucky bitch. Get out of here and never show your face in front of me again. Jolene left with hatred in her eyes, but my man, whom I had regained, had no care for her. My best friend Lydia had secretly come to save me, but I refused. She yelled at me, Kirsten, you're so stupid. Have you forgotten how Zane killed your son? And now you're falling for him again? Are you crazy? A man who cheats once will do it again and again. I still turned her away, but I cried my heart out after she left angrily. My eyes were as swollen as walnuts. It was just because I didn't want to drag her down. My best friend had just barely settled down in the country. I couldn't let her fight against Zane, who was rich and powerful. I couldn't ruin her. Zane knew everything under his surveillance. When he found out, he happily hugged and kissed me. My wife loves me the most. Don't worry, I'll never do it again. I only love you. I'm going to get a vasectomy reversal, and we'll have another child. He took me to our son's grave and prayed again and again, weeping uncontrollably. Then he mentioned having another child to compensate. Sometimes at night, he would hold my hand and fantasize about what our child would look like. Hopefully it's a boy, and he looks like me just like our son. He can also inherit my business. Wife, I can't wait to have a child with you. Every time he mentioned this, I would simply reply, okay, but secretly take birth control pills in the middle of the night. I couldn't forget the hatred. On his birthday, I unusually suggested we go out for a walk. At the traffic lights in the mall, a van with flashing lights sped towards Zane and me. It was finally coming. I knew that Jolene was inside, and I had let her go on purpose. She definitely wouldn't give up so easily, so I decided to die with Zane. Before sensing the danger, I suddenly asked him a question. Zane, if only one of us can live now, who would you choose? He tucked my clothes closer to me, rubbed my nose, and smiled kindly. I won't choose anyone. I'll die with you. Don't you dare leave me, even if you die. Wife, we're going to be together forever. You forgot. You still owe me so many children. To lull him into a false sense of security, I took the initiative to seduce him many times. I talked about having children and retiring abroad. I purposely leaned to the side so that the people in the van could see our actions. To further provoke her, the van's engine was still running, but there was no specific movement. With a heavy heart, I closed my eyes and kissed him. Zane was a little surprised but still held my waist and closed his eyes, indulging in it. Deepening the kiss, Jolene's eyes turned red with anger. She stepped on the gas pedal, and then laughed madly. Die, you both die for me, ha 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 ha. She floored the gas pedal. I pushed him away hard, ready to meet the piercing pain. Even if I died, I didn't want my body to be mixed up with Zane's, so that no one could tell us apart. But in the end, I only smelled a pungent smell of blood, and there was no pain. Zane used his body to protect me tightly, and his lower body was crushed under the car, turning into flesh. A muffled groan came from his ears. His spine was severely impacted, and he actually used his bones to block the huge impact for me. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, and he still tried to protect the back of my head with his last bit of strength. A large piece of flesh was scraped off the back of his hand, revealing the bare bones. His mouth opened, as if he was still saying something. He was still holding my hand tightly until his death. The words inseparable in life and death, engraved on the wedding ring, were stained with blood, making the words unclear. The police arrived at the scene and only saw me lying in a pool of blood with a vacant look. I think he was a liar. He clearly chose to let me live. Jolene, who was caught on the spot, was quickly sentenced to death. Before she died, she kept yelling, Kirsten, I hate you to death. Why does Zane only like you no matter what I do? The insurance agent told me this news, and I had no reaction. They mentioned Zane's will again. All his property belonged to me. This was decided by Mr. Zane when he first started the company. And there are also old age insurance, medical insurance, and accidental personal insurance. And the beneficiaries are you and your son, Mr. Wilder. At that time, he had not expected our son to pass away because of his accident. When I signed, I saw his strong and powerful handwriting on the other side, and tears fell involuntarily. The beneficiary was also written by him personally, one stroke at a time. A long time later, I donated all of Zane's property to my best friend. Standing in front of the two large and small tombstones, letting the rain wet my shoulders, different scenes appeared in my mind. He knelt 9,999 steps to pray for me, praying for my safe delivery, willing to lose 10 years of his life just to exchange for my mother and child's safety. He held our newborn son in his arms, his eyes filled with tears, and he muttered to me on the delivery bed that he wouldn't have any more children. He felt sorry for my hard work. On our son's full moon, he took me and our son to take a family photo and smiled so hard that he couldn't see his teeth. Scene after scene flashed by, and later, the man's handsome face and the sweaty face when he was messing around with Jolene gradually merged. I couldn't say anything. I could only cry nonstop, as if I wanted to cry all the tears in my life dry, until the rain gradually stopped and the sun appeared. I took a deep breath and pressed all the bitterness in my heart. Looking at the words Zane that were shining under the sun, a flash of inspiration came to me, and I finally remembered his dying words. He said, "I'm sorry. I'll love you well in the next life." I didn't answer at that time, and now I couldn't help but mutter to myself, if there really is a next life, I don't want to meet you again. Zane, I'm so tired of loving you. We will never meet again in this life or the next.